All right, JavaScript time. So the bottom of this page, I'm going to grab a script tag. I closed out my style sheet because this isn't going to be about styling this page. It's just going to be about adding some of these images from an array rather than hard coding them in through the HTML. So I'm going to get bold. I'm going to erase all of these stitch images and in the short run have nothing. So we'll fix that. All right. So first thing I'm going to do is create an image array. I will call mine array image because I'm very creative like that. And I'm going to put in, again, my creativity is shining through. All three of mine are going to have this stitch image. Okay, so I have an array. And before we hard coded in each of those arrays elements, when we were on our last video, we would do array image of 0, array image of 1, and array image of 2. But I think that's not as efficient as it could be. And so the purpose of today's video is to talk about looping and conditions with JavaScript, which also is applicable to any language. All languages have looping of some type. Well, HTML doesn't, but your programming languages will have the same foundation. So let's just jump in. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, just to give us a visual, and ARY, stop talking, LENGTH. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my dev tools up and go to my console, and I use this array image dot length. So dot length is a property that will tell us how many elements are in this array, which is good to know, because that way if somebody adds more images or less images, we don't have to hard code in 3 or 2. This value is a way to keep us dynamic. We don't have to know ahead of time how many elements are in the array. We can just get that information with the dot length. So if we added another stitch, this is why I do it. It's copy and paste. I'm not good at typing in on the video, and we're getting 4. Okay, so that's a good thing for us to know as we try to loop through our arrays. And let me kind of go into what I'm trying to do with that. All right, so where do I start? The first thing I'm going to do, the idea here is that we're going to loop through the array, and every time, we'll have the program go over and over and over again and find each value of these. So instead of my writing it out 4 times, print out array image of 0, array image of 1, and hard code all of that in, and who knows what happens if people add more images, I'm just going to create a loop which will have the JavaScript do a circular, it'll do the code over and over and over again until a certain condition is met, at which time it'll stop looping. In other words, if we were to say that in English, JavaScript, can you please read every element in my array? And each time you read an element in the array, please print that into my gallery. So we can see that that's a command or a direction that we would do 4 times. It's repetitious, right? So it's the same thing with the loop. Instead of writing it one line after another, we'll just write the command once and have the code loop through it repetitively over and over again until there's no more elements left in the array. In other words, until you've done it, in this case, 4 times. Or if we only have 3 elements, please loop 3 times. And we'll do it in 2 different ways. So the first way is what I'm going to use is the while loop. And the way the while loop works, and then while this condition is true, this is just kind of me typing out what's going to happen. So as long as the condition is true, I'm going to ask you to write the image tag to the gallery. Okay, so as many times, and what is the condition? The condition is as long as there is an element in the array, keep doing this over and over again until there's no more elements in the array, and then stop and then do the next thing, whatever that thing happens to be. In this case, we'll do a console log finished or something. Okay, no more elements left in the array. Okay, so how do we write this? This is definitely not correct. This is me just thinking out loud what I need to do in order to create that. So while the condition is true, write this. So this is how we're going to do it. We're going to set a initial value to 0. So I'm going to call this array index equals 0. And let me just kind of type this out and then kind of backpedal and explain. Well, array index is less than array image of dot length. And then you know what? Let's just do this to start with. Let's just do, I'm always about just doing one thing at a time and testing the code to see if it works. And so let's see, let's do a console.log array index, array image, and I'll explain this in a minute. I'm going to just get my thoughts out while they're all discombobulated. Okay. So I'm getting an error message. Array image is not defined. So that's because line 56, while array index, oh, I misspelled array image. Okay. So I'm getting error messages here in my console, so that helps me determine what did I do wrong. And it says array image is not defined, so it doesn't know, JavaScript has no clue what my array ARY image is. It says go look on line 56 for that error. And so I looked on line 56 and found ARY image, and it doesn't know what this is, and that's because I can see that I created an array IMG, so it doesn't know what's going on. So let me try that. And apparently I'm still spelling wrong. Did that on purpose just to see if you would notice. Did you look and say, oh, look, same problem? I didn't do it on purpose. All right. Okay, so now things are being displayed on my console. So let's talk about what's happening. Array index, so I set an initial value to 0. And I gave it the name array index because I'm trying to get you to see that this value represents each element in the array. So first it's going to be 0, then it's going to be 1, then it's going to be 2, and then it's going to be 3. And so my condition that needs to be met is, as long as array index is this value is less than the length of the array is 1, 2, 3, 4. So as long as array index is less than 4, keep looping through here. Once array index is either equal to the length or greater, then do the next line. And so before I look at here, let me just make sure it says console log array image of array index. So if array index is 0 the first time in the loop, array image will be 0, which is stitch. Okay, so is it console logging stitch? Yes, it is. And since it's the same value, it's 4 here. So I can see it did it 4 times. Maybe it'd be a little bit more clear just for this demonstration to do a 1, a 2, a 3. I'm not actually trying to show that image yet. So the point being there is you can see each time it goes through the array, it's printing out that value. But the important key is I need to make sure at the end of each iteration, each time we go through this loop, I need to make sure I add 1 back into array index. If I don't add one in, so that would keep array index always at 0, which means this loop will continue forever, because if array index is always 0, it'll never meet the condition of being greater than or equal to array image of length, in which case we'll never get out of this loop. So this is an important part of a while loop, is somehow we have a condition that we will be able to continually loop through. We'll tell the code to do this same command over and over again but we have to make sure we give the condition an out. So somehow we have to, in this loop, make sure that somehow we'll be able to get out of the loop. All right, so I know that I'm now outputting the correct values, although this actually isn't the name of an image. So I'm going to do my correct image name now because I want to actually display that image, which I'm not doing right now. Right now I'm just console logging for troubleshooting to make sure that I'm doing it correctly. Okay, so what I'm going to do then, since I know this is working, I'm going to create, just again so I know that I'm doing it correctly, I'm going to create some kind of a string that's going to hold my image. My image is equal to, and I'm going to create in here what my image tag needs to look like, because this gets kind of confusing to me because I have to write, oh, I lost my image tag now. I have to write, like if I had an image here, let me just write it out so I remember. So this is stitch1 or stitch.png, right? And we're not really putting an alt tag in, which is not technically correct, but it'll still work for the moment. And so if image source equals, I think that's why you're upset, isn't it? Pretty sure that's why you're upset. Okay, so this is what I need to write with my JavaScript. I need to write in the HTML, but in place of the hard-coded stitch.png, I need to concatenate the string that's in my array. So this is what I'm trying to accomplish. And so I'm going to make a string to see if I accomplished it correctly before I actually attempt to put it into the gallery. Again, one step at a time. So I need to write the image tag, image. I need the source equals, and then I need some single quotes. But inside of those single quotes, I need to place the value of the array. So I need to close my string, concatenate my array item, array image of array index, okay, plus, and then I have another new string that I'm creating. There's my single quote that's going to close this single quote. And then I need the closing angle bracket and a semicolon to end the JavaScript. I'm not sure if I did that correctly, so I'm not going to console log this anymore because I know that was working, which is how I knew I could use that here, right? And so again, one step at a time. So now let's console log my image. And let's see what that string looks like to see if I did it right. All right, so this is what got written 4 times. Image src equals, and I have the open and close single quotations and the closing angle bracket. So this does look like a valid HTML string. So I know I'm safe now to try and put that into my gallery up here, which we're going to do next. So this is a great, like what if I forgot a quotation here, and what if I forgot the angle bracket? This is a good troubleshooting technique. So if I wrote this in my HTML document, is it a good chance that my image is going to be displayed? No, probably not, because I didn't write my index, my HTML correctly. I keep saying index, HTML correctly. So I'm going to troubleshoot it first. Make sure that I'm writing my index, my HTML correctly. Once I know that that is now a valid HTML string, then I know that I can apply that to my image gallery, and that's what we're going to do next. So in the last video, we did a lot of document writes, and that was a good starting tool, but it's not the end. It's not what we ideally want to use, because document write only works as the page is being displayed. Our page has already been displayed. So if we try to document, let me just do it. Let's do a document write, and you'll see what I'm trying to refer to. Let's do a document write, and let's write my image, and let's see what happens. So I don't even know where it went. It should have showed up. Okay, well, always good when a plan does not go the way you expected it to. Interesting. Okay, document write, once the page has been rendered, this is what I was trying to get at without a very good example, obviously. Once document write will overwrite and reload the page if we try to use it after the page has already been displayed. So document write is not good about just updating a page dynamically. Once the page is loaded, We don't want to use document write to make changes to our document, to our DOM as it's called. For that, we're going to use get element by ID instead. And so that's a special function that is available to us. Let me just write it down so we know. In fact, I'm going to put it above my while loop here. I'm going to write my element is equal to, let me just write this out, document get element by ID. And I'm going to refer to my gallery, which has this ID. I'm going to backpedal here. So, okay. So what we're doing is we haven't really addressed ID yet. And we talked a lot about class, but we didn't do anything about ID. So in our CSS HTML example we did in the last video, we had several elements that had the same class of section dark. And our agreement is that a class can have, an element can have multiple classes assigned to it of section dark, for example. We have a footer with a section dark, and we have a header with a section dark. So we can have multiple elements can have the same class name. That's okay. ID works exactly the same way as class does. The only difference is there must be only one. There can be only one. Reference of Highlander if you're, never mind. So that's a movie from the show from the past. It was really cool. Anyway, nothing to do with this. So there can only be one ID.js image in this document. There can be another ID. If for some reason I needed this to be an ID of swim or something, that's valid. There can be more than one ID on this page, but there should only be one ID with the same name. So this is okay. This would be not okay. Okay. And from a CSS standpoint, it's going to work. In fact, you see it's got errors. From a CSS standpoint, it's going to work the same as far as being able to style an ID individually, with the exception of, let me just add this for a visual. Obviously CSS doesn't go here, but in our CSS, when we did, if we wanted to get to a class, we did a period with a section. If you're trying to select an ID, then it's a hashtag, and our ID was JS, what did I do? JS image. So same idea as far as CSS is concerned. We're just using a hashtag instead of a period. But where ID really comes into play for us more so in CSS is JavaScript. And that is because of what we're doing right here, where we're wanting to grab just a single item. I just want to be able to access this section. So it has to be unique. Oh, wait, wrong one. No, I got rid of the ID. ID equals JS image. Okay, so by giving this ID JS image, I'm making this section unique from all others. Nobody else can have that. JavaScript is expecting only one element to have an ID, which enables me to go get a hold of that element through this method, this function called, and I need the whole thing, document.getElement by ID. Notice the casing. So go grab that element, which is this one. Go get this element and put it into this variable so I have access to it. And why would I want to have access to it? I will show you. So am I console logging something? I am. So I'm going to not console that. I'm going to console log my element so I can see what's in it. What are we physically getting a hold of? And here you can see that I am literally getting a hold of that section. So now that I have that section in my variable, I have access to everything about that section. I have access to the class. I have access to anything that's inside of it. And what I care about today, for the purpose of this video, is what we call the inner HTML. So I want to be able to tag onto dynamically all of my images into this section that I grabbed a hold of here in my element. Meaning that, let's do this. I think I can do it here. So now that I have a hold of this element in my console, let me just try something. So I'm going to try my element, and then I'm going to put in inner HTML equals, here is my stuff. And so what we should see is that that information was literally put inside that div, or in this case, that section. It also overwrote my image gallery. So let's just start again and see it again. So there's my image gallery. If I grab a hold of my element, which is this entire section right here, and let's say I do just grab the H1 and see what I get. Oh, bad example. H1 dot text value likes, oh, dot inner HTML. Not a good example. All right. How can I get a hold of that? Anyway, really good when things go badly. But this is how you learn. You trial and error, and then I would, off camera, figure out how would I get to that H1. But for the example that I'm trying to do here, here's what I'm going to do. Get element, inner HTML. I'm going to do a plus equals, and I'm going to say, here is more stuff. So what I'm doing now is, whatever's inside of my element already, which is the H1, go ahead and plus equals, append onto the end of that my new stuff. So now I have both. Okay, so the idea here is, if you can see where we're going to take this section, do a plus equals to the inner HTML, and write, in fact, do we have it here? We do. Let's see. So let's do this just to build it. All right, so if I have my element dot inner HTML plus equals this part that we created here, let's see what we get. Oh, looks like I built my, good troubleshooting. Looks like I built my image wrong. So I would need to fix that. This is why console logging is a great tool. In my yapping, I didn't realize that I have an extra. There we go. So now my image tag is correct. Let's try that again. So my element dot inner HTML plus equals, and then we're going to plug this one in, and let's see if we can get this to work. And hit enter. Let's put some quotations around this and see if that works. Okay. And there we got our image. So through trial and error and babbling on and on, we need to make sure that in order to append our images to our inner HTML, this is how we do it. Hopefully this helps you see how you can troubleshoot when things aren't going right, because that's the key to programming, truthfully. All right, so that means that I need to reconstruct what we've done here, and I've almost got it in play already. I've already got my element. I need to add the inner HTML plus and equal to my string that I've already created, which is here. So we're going to do that on the next line. So my element, inner HTML plus equals, and I already created a string, so the string should work. Remember, I couldn't use a string there, so let's try this and see what happens. So now we should have however many images of Stitch there are, and we do. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So in this example, we used a while loop. Took us a while to get there. Get it? While, trial and error. We had to keep repeating our errors over and over again until we got it right. Now we can exit and we can spell finished correctly. Yay! All right. So that's one way to do it. We're going to do, this is a while loop, is a very effective looping construct, but there's another way and maybe an easier way for us to do a loop of an array. And we'll do that next. So I'm going to comment out the while loop, and we're going to go about it a little bit differently. So I'm not going to need this anymore. So same idea, we're still going to write our, I'll borrow some of my code back here. But now instead of looping with a while loop, we're going to loop with a for loop. Let me just type it out because we can see how well that's gone for us so far. For I equals 0, I less than array image dot length, I plus plus. And then I'm going to grab this. Grab this. And this. And let me make sure it still works. My browser got upset and quit for some reason. That's, oh, I am completely locked out, which means that I'll put this on hold. I'll be right back. All right, so my browser was upset because I'm in an infinite loop. So I assume that's what it was upset about, but I wasn't quite done here. All right, so let's see if that works. There we go. All right, so I did make a mistake. How unusual. All right, so let's look and see what I've done here. So I did a for loop, and the only thing I changed, let's see. So we've got a for loop, and the way that a for loop works is it also loops until a condition is met, but we've got some little extra syntax that goes on here in the parentheses. And so what we've done here is this part that says for I equals 0 is very exactly what we've done here. We've set a value. This time we call it I, which is kind of convention. It's kind of standard in a for loop to use an I, which stands for, I guess, index. So what we've done here is the same thing we've done here. For I, var I equals 0, we've set I equal to 0 at the very beginning. As long as I is less than array image length, which is exactly what we did here. And each time you go through the loop, increment I by 1, which is exactly what we did here, and then check this value again. So the first time I is equal to 0, is I less than array image length? Yes, it is. Then do this. Come back through the second time, increment I by 1, so now I will be 1. Is 1 still less than the array image length? Why, yes, it is. So do this again. And continue on until I ends up being, in our case, 4. Is 4 less than 4, which is the length of our array? No. So we'll exit the loop and then we'll have the finished. So this is another version of doing the while loop, which is better. Absolutely. Whatever you answered is correct. It just depends on the scenario. It's just two tools to do the same type of thing. You just have to recognize how they work so you can use them correctly. In other words, here we had to make sure we incremented our value. And we'll see another way to use a while loop here at the end of this video. But for the moment, we now have the ability to add for example, add another image. And we're going to add another stitch image, and it should just work, right? And because all of those images are being placed inside of our class of gallery, what did we do? Gallery, class gallery, and we gave the hover a certain transition and the background color and the border radius and all of that. All of our stitches are working the way we had intended them to, but now we're being a little bit more dynamic and being able to add or subtract images, and it just works. So now we just have the 4. All right, so I'm going to take this one level further, and we'll do another demonstration of a while loop and also of an if condition. So this might be a little bit of a contrived example, but I'm going to do it anyway because I think it's good to help us demonstrate concepts. So far we have been getting comfortable with looping, and whether it be with a while loop or with a for loop. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask my user to tell me how many of these images they would like me to display in the gallery. Again, it's kind of a contrived example, but it just helps me demonstrate some of the concepts that I want to make sure that you're solid with. So I'm going to ask them, prompt, okay. I'm going to get off my live server here. I don't want it to keep prompting me. So let me, instead of live server, which I had here, let me just open it up in my browser so it doesn't keep prompting me when I'm in the middle of stuff like that. All right, so I think I'm out of prompts. Okay, so what I'm going to do, first of all, is console log what they return. And here's why. Okay, so if they put in a number, that seems to work. We kind of did this before. It console logged how many? So 4. How else am I console logging? Let me unconsole log other stuff so I can just see the matter at hand. Okay, what if they just clicked on OK? Let's see what we get. We get an empty string, okay? And what if they click on cancel? We get a null. So what we're going to do is take that value and try to determine, we're going to start being a little bit smarter now and try to determine what did they click, and therefore how shall we respond. So let's try and mess with that. So what we're going to do is now we're going to create an if statement. And I'm going to say if how many is equal to, notice the double equals, so this is a comparison, not an assignment. So in other words, if these two things are the same, if this is the same as this, if this is a comparison, so compare both sides and let me know if they are the same or not. A single equal sign would say put this value into how many. That's called an assignment, which is not what I'm doing. I'm doing a comparison. So compare both sides of this equation and decide if they're equal, true or false. So if it's an empty string, which we saw a moment ago, let's do this. Let's console log you didn't enter anything. And then let's just leave it at that and see what happens. So if they hit OK, which was an empty string, right, then you didn't enter anything. That's working. And if they hit something else, nothing's happening. Okay, still console logging. Oh, I'm console logging the value. Okay. So what are we doing here? We are creating a situation where we are deciding between doing one thing or another. We're not looping. In this case, we had a condition where we had to decide if something was true or false, and we would continue to do the thing until this became false. We're still doing a condition here that's looking for true or false, but there's no loop. All we're doing is the same thing as if you and I were having a communication and we said, if something is true, then do this, otherwise do that, and then move on. We don't ask the question over and over again. So an if block is simply making a decision and then moving on, as opposed to a looping construct, which is making decisions constantly until this decision becomes false and then moves on. So if how many is equal to an empty string, then, so we can ask more than one thing. At the moment, let's get rid of all the console logging that's happening. Let's do this, console log, move on. Okay, and so the point here is, once a decision has been made, did the user click on OK or one of the other two things? If the answer is yes, one of the other two things were the deal, then just click on move on. So let's click OK, and it typed move on, and then it in fact went on and probably did my images. Okay, so life went on. It didn't keep going over and over again. What are you doing there? Okay, so if is only inside of these curly braces. If this is true, then do this. That's it. That's all there is to that. But maybe we have another scenario. Maybe we can say else if. So here's another thing. If they entered this, if they entered OK, it's an empty string. If they hit the cancel button, then we saw that it was null, right? So here's another condition we have to check for. I know I didn't do my condition right. Okay, so let me just write it out. How many is equal to, we can write that word null just like we saw it. Console log you pressed the cancel key. Spelling isn't a thing. The cancel key. Okay, so let's see if that works. Okay, so now there's a decision being made. The code has to make a decision. Did they do this? If yes, then console log that. Else, if they did this, then console log that. If neither of these conditions are true, then it's just going to do the move on, right? So, in fact, it's going to do move on either way. So let's hit OK, which is this condition, right? So if we click on OK, you didn't enter anything, got console logged, and then we moved on. Let's run it again and hit cancel. You press the cancel key, so this part became true, and that's the only part that got rendered, and then it moved on. Okay, so what if they put in a valid number? Let's say they put in a 5. So we are just moving on. Oh, I guess I'm console logging how many right here. That's good. Okay, so neither of these became true, and so neither of these were rendered, and we just moved on. So you can make as many else ifs as you need to, and recognize that only the one, as soon as one is evaluated, we will exit the else loop. I had too many thoughts in my head, I couldn't get them out. So let me just do this. So else, console log how many? Let's do this. You entered plus. Okay, so now we have 3 scenarios. And so let's test that last one. How many images did I play? Let's say 5. You entered 5 and move on. So the important takeaway here is that where before we only had 2 if statements, an else is a catch-all. So now if neither of these is true, then for sure do this one. Okay, so this one will run, else is a catch-all. There is no condition on with else, and it is the final bucket, if you will. So you don't have to have it. In fact, originally, this is all we had, right? Was just this part here. And so all that did was evaluate if they entered in the OK and nothing was entered. And then we moved on. So an if block is only one thing is going to be rendered. Maybe nothing is going to be rendered if you don't have an else statement. But if you have an else statement, then you don't have a condition. It simply means if nothing else is true, then do this. Okay, so could we also combine these two together? Well, we could. So that's another way to do it. So we're going to use this shortcut called OR, an OR operator, which is 2 of these above the the backslash key. So I did a shift in the backslash key. We have these 2 long vertical lines, and that's the OR. And I could do this. I don't need this one now. Okay, so now the question is, if either of these is true, and just like if you said it out loud, if how many is equal to empty string, or how many is null, then you entered maybe an you didn't enter anything. Otherwise, else, console log and enter what they entered. So this is perhaps a good place for a loop. In other words, let's keep them looping and answering this prompt until they enter something in a value. So what if we put this in a loop? Okay. So as long as how many is equal to blank, or empty string, or how many is equal to null, well, console log, you didn't have any, you didn't enter anything. Remember that, let's put these into our open and close curly braces. Remember in a while loop that we have to provide some kind of condition for us to get out of the loop. So we're going to have to prompt again so that we have the ability to change how many into something that is neither one of these. So let's do that. I'm going to copy that and put that in here. So now we'll prompt them again. So we should be giving them the ability to enter in until they put something valid. So let's try that and see what happens. So if they put in OK, notice it prompted me again. It's kind of a, I maybe should change the prompt so I know it's a new one, but if I hit cancel, OK. So you can see I'm stuck in this loop until I put in something that is not the OK or the cancel, the empty string or the null. So let's put in a 5. Okay, I moved on. Well, yeah, but can't I do this? I wanted to print out how many and it didn't do that, right? Well, why not? Well, let's look. The while loop, okay, so let's start again. So the if statement started, the very first one, right? So the very first one went, that's this one. They clicked on either OK or cancel. So if one of these was true, so let's say we clicked on OK. So how many is now an empty string? So this is true. So we did this, right? And we did this over and over again until how many received a proper value. But remember that with this if statement, we don't start again and check an if else. Once this is done, that's it. We get out of the if condition. And so we did this over and over again. Then we exited the if condition and then our move on ran, which is not necessarily ideal because we still wanted to print out what they did, right? So what I might do instead here is, let's just comment this out so I can see where I came from. What if I keep them, let me just, let's see, stop talking so I can think. So I'm going to keep them in a while loop until let's put this here. So now I'll keep them in a loop until they answer it correctly. So now I don't really need this anymore because I forced them to answer it correctly. So this if is kind of no longer important, right? And so, because I know that it's a valid number now, so I keep them looping until I get a valid number. And now what I'm going to do, I'll use my if statement to be a little bit smarter now. I'll make sure that, let's do this, if how many is less than or equal to our array image, then we're good. So now I'm doing a little error trapping, right? Because now I'm checking to see, okay, I know you put something in. So now I'm going to use my if statement to display the amount of images they want as long as they chose a number that's less than or equal to the amount of numbers that I have in my array. Does that make sense? Otherwise, maybe I don't have that many pictures. Okay, so let's run this again. Oh, now I have to put something in. Let's start again. Okay, so now let's see what happens. So I need to stay in here until I put a valid number in. So if I put in 1, 2, 3, 4, if I put in 4, I want you to print out 4 images, it should work. You entered 4. You entered 4, so this part worked. So what if I put in 6? Oh, look, I did this wrong. It's like, that shouldn't have worked. This is why you test your code. I entered in 6, that's too many, and I still got this if condition still rendered correctly. I did something wrong. Well, I didn't put image array image dot length. That's what I needed to do. So I needed to check against the length of that array. How many elements are in that array? And I didn't add that in. GTH. Okay, so let's try it again. Now let's put in 6, and I should get, I don't have that many pictures. Let's see what happens. Now I don't have that many pictures. So again, hopefully, and I made some mistakes because I've been talking and doing this kind of as I go, but it's important to see how you troubleshoot. That's probably the most important lesson in programming is, yeah, it didn't go the way I expected because I'm not perfect. Don't tell my husband that part. But anyway, but how can I troubleshoot to figure out why did it not work? And did I troubleshoot all scenarios to make sure everything is working the way I expected it to? And so now that I have this working correctly, then I could probably move my for loop. If I know that I have the right amount of elements in the array, then I could probably move this in there and comment it out so it's not here. Now I can probably do this successfully because I know that I won't get an error. I can print out however many they need me to print out or ask me to print out. I'm going to need to make sure I get my element above. Right, maybe I can put it here just so the two go together. And now I'll just troubleshoot how many images. I just want to do 2. Let's see. Oh, now I probably have another error where, okay, I put 2, but I did 4. So maybe now what we'll do here, instead of putting in the array length, now we're just put in how many. Because that's all they wanted was however many they put in. I've already checked to make sure that they put in a value that I have. So now I can print what they want. So let's try 2 now and see if I get 2 stitches. And I do. Let's try to do 6. Do I have 6 of them? I do not, so I got an error. I don't have that many pictures. Let's try 3 and see if that works. And 3 works. Whew, that was a lot of work, but there was a lot of good stuff in here that hopefully helps build you a programming foundation, as well as we've got to interact with the ID in our document. So we created an array. We figured out how to do some while loops. We did a while loop in 2 different ways. One by prompting our user to get a value that we were interested in, or we also did a while loop that kept track of what we call an iterator. It kept track of a value, like we kept iterating by 1. We kept adding 1 to index until we were less than another specified value. So that was 2 ways to use the while loop. We also created a for loop with the idea that we already knew how many times we were going to loop through it. And so we just looped through that many times. Here we didn't really know how many times we were going to loop through. So 2 different ways to do that. What else did we do? We did an if statement. We figured out that an if statement will only do one of the conditions. It'll only render one of the conditions to see if it's true. Won't do more than one, and it certainly won't loop through. We can also provide an else condition at the very end that does not have a condition. It's just going to catch everything that doesn't match. And what else did we do? And we used document get element by ID to grab hold of specific pieces of our HTML so we could dynamically make changes to it even after the page was loaded. And we did that with the get element by ID, which ended up being right here. All right, that was a lot to absorb. I hope you were able to do it.